Hello, hi. Thank you all for joining this session. So we've been listening a lot about different types of risks in robotics industry. And what we want to leave you with today is the psychosocial safety and trust in terms of robotics industry. So we're going to be presenting some of the work that we are doing at the Institute for Humane Robotics. So first question that I'm going to have for all of you is, what will happen to humanity when robots enter our life at scale? This is the centerpiece question of the work that we are doing at the Institute. And what we are a private research organization and a standards body that's working on all robots entering human environments, specifically caregiving, household, education, and healthcare. So historically speaking, what we've seen with technology industry is that we build, we deploy, and then we are dealing with the consequences. And so a couple of examples of that would be starting with social media. So for 12 years now, we already have all the depth of the research on how social media has been shaping, especially child's development, but also generally humanity. Some of the cases that we've been seeing in the last years are related to cyberbullying, increase in anxiety, depression, and suicide rates. Similar to that, we are also now experiencing the same problems in AI space. Most recently, we've seen a couple of cases when teenagers would commit suicide with the help of their AI. Specifically with the story of Adam, he had 277 mentions of suicide in his correspondence with ChatGPT. It went so far that ChatGPT helped him to brainstorm the ways how he should tie a knot that he used to end up hanging himself. And unfortunately, after that, his parents found him dead in his room. Now, OpenAI is going through a lawsuit with the family, and what we are seeing is this is something that might also happen in the robotics industry. One example of something that already did happen in the robotics industry is with our beloved Moxie. Moxie was one of the earliest social companion robots that came out of MIT. It was built to have a emotional and social support for kids. But when the company went bankrupt, Moxie just stopped working. And all of a sudden, all these households and people and families that have had Moxie as a part of their family have left with the questions of, how do I explain to my child that this thing that he connected to or she connected to is no longer alive? And we are entering the era of humanoids. Some of the founders of the largest companies are so willingly sharing in their media campaigns that their robots, among other things, are also going to be nannying your children. And so the use case that we're seeing that is going to become as an intentional utilization of their robots. But if you look at their team structure, if you look at their frameworks, no child development experts, no family mental health experts. So what we are seeing is that we could come across at a much, much, much larger crisis with robots entering our households. And as mentioned before, this is something that we don't really have to predict. We already have the data. We already have the history to learn from. And now we have a window of opportunity to actually impact that space. And I'm going to give it to Roshni to talk a little bit about one of the most important ingredients of this process.
Thank you. So I want to talk a bit about empathy. My research looked at how empathy and antisocial behavior manifests in the brain and in humans as well as in AI. So just to start with a quick definition of what empathy is, the most basic way you can define it is to understand and share the feelings of others. But when we think of neuroscience and psychology, we actually go a bit deeper than that and actually split empathy into these two different subtypes of cognitive empathy and affective empathy. So cognitive empathy is our ability to infer and model the states of others, while affective empathy is actually our ability to share the states of others. And when we look in the brain, these actually relate to different neural processes. Specifically, cognitive empathy is related to the default mode network, which is a set of brain regions that are often activated together when you think of self-referential thought, daydreaming, what we call resting state in the fMRI scanner, where we have people just lie there and think of whatever they want to think of. In terms of affective empathy, which is sharing the states of others, this relates to activity in the insular cortex. It's kind of like a mini brain if you open the brain up, and damage to this area actually leads to a lack of ability to share states with others. And so these are two dissociable systems, which means one of these can run without the other. And what we can see is that when one type of empathy works without the other, we get what is called, in AI at least, as misalignment. In biology, this is sometimes referred to as antisocial behavior, psychopathy, which is when you see one type of empathy with the lack of the other. Specifically, this is when you have an enhanced ability of cognitive empathy, of predicting the states of others, and a lack of being able to share those states. So when you think of AI models that are built entirely on human data, they are very, very advanced at predicting our states, at understanding human emotion, at understanding human vulnerabilities, but they're not embodied. And they lack this ability of sharing these states with us. So when we think about misalignment, this can obviously lead to misalignment, is this mismatch of empathy. From a biological perspective, we can see that these antisocial behaviors or misaligned behaviors can occur when there is a hypersensitivity to reward, where people are overly sensitive to money or power or whatever reward means to them, paired with this impaired empathy. And this can lead to these undesirable personalities. Similar things can happen in artificial systems or artificial intelligence, where you can have this enhanced sensitivity to reward, as well as this dysfunction in empathy. And one prominent example that we can actually study very well in human systems is the dark triad of personality. So this is what my dissertation focused on, was how do we better understand misalignment using these frameworks that we can use from human intelligence and from the biological side of things. So the dark triad is a set of 3 traits, which is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And one thing that links these together is an enhanced cognitive empathy abilities with a lack of affective empathy. And I studied this at 3 levels. I looked at the brain, I looked at behavior, and then I also looked at AI, specifically how these dark triad personas might be able to manifest in large language models. So one of the things that I did was ask these different moral dilemmas to both humans and to my AI models that I had fine-tuned into these personas. So it's a very basic trolley dilemma, but there were many different versions of it. One of them is it appropriate to swerve and hit an old lady in order to save a young mother and her child? And I wanted to see how easily, not necessarily can the models take on these personas. We know AI models are very, very good at persona modeling, but how easily can we actually tweak them into changing their response? Which was actually very, very easy. I used as few as 36 examples in the fine-tuning data set, which, if you're familiar with fine-tuning, that's incredibly small for large language models. And again, it's not necessarily surprising that this is possible, that they are able to take on the personas, but the surprising thing is how easily they can be manipulated, how easily these AI models can actually become misaligned. And what's even more concerning is these models are being deployed into other autonomous agents as well as into robots. For example, if you think of this same trolley dilemma, but in a more real-world example with a Tesla that actually has to make this decision, it's concerning that these models are so easily manipulated and so easily misaligned. And as we know, a lot of these large language models are actually being deployed into robots. For example, even the mechanism behind full self-driving is being integrated into Tesla's Optimus. And the fact that these models can be so easily misaligned, whether it's large language models or robots, leads to a question of trust, of how easily can we trust these robots when we bring them into our homes. And this leads to the safety layer that we want to build at the Institute for Humane Robotics.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna share a little bit about the actual work that we are doing at the Institute. So how we run is on the ecosystem approach. So we have a 5-department model. So we work directly with industry, with different robotics companies across the United States, Asia, and Europe. We bring them into research labs and we help university to get access to the robots that they usually wouldn't be able to access because of the subscription model. And during that process, we are learning a lot of wonderful insights. And those insights are translated into policy. So we work with lobbyists in Washington, D.C. on new legislations that are going to be regulating the psychosocial safety segment of the industry. But not just that, we know that in order for us to be able to really make a change, we also have to have a bottoms-up approach. So besides just approaching through policy, industry, and research, we are also working on education and media. So we are going to be running different docuseries, shows, movies, podcasts, to be able to educate an average Joe to understand and demystify the concepts from robotics industry. So as you can see, we have a 3 co-founder team. So Roshni just finished her PhD in neuroscience and technology. Phil is from MIT Media Lab and from Microsoft. And my background is in digital well-being and technology's impact on child's development, where I was building 3 different startups in this space. But we are not doing this alone. So we already have quite of a partner network. So we work with Bay Area Robotics, Mass Robotics, with UNICEF, MIT Media Lab, Princeton, All Tech is Human. And we are inviting collaborators to help us to shape the standards that are going to be impacting this space. And as mentioned at the beginning of the speech, this time we actually have an opportunity to break the pattern. So what we could do is we can create standards before we are scaling in the industry. We can create relational risk audits. We can have exit plans by design, knowing what happens when your technology stops working and how it's going to be impacting humans. And we also can have open frameworks and shared playbooks that we develop jointly. And one thing that we always like to pinpoint to the industry is that human-centered design actually saves you money on the long run. So what's really important with technology that's entering our lives is that there is a component of user trust. So people will be rather buying and choosing technology that they trust into their science, into their marketing, and into the missions of the company. As we've seen in lately examples with Meta, with Google, with Snapchat, one lawsuit can cost you way more than participating in a decade of compliance. And in the end, we invite industry to help to shape the standards before the standards shape the industry. So as mentioned, this is the window of opportunity when we have still the time to be shaping these policies together. And one important thing to think about is that ethical design is not a cost, it is an infrastructure for sustainable growth, and people really need it. And one more time, an invite for anyone in the room, come and join with us on this big mission to build standards and shape them, either from the industry standpoint, academia, legislation, and we are also inviting investors who are interested in learning about this space to join our mission. And with that, we conclude with inviting you all to be a part of a more humane future. Thank you so much. Questions? I mean, do we have, are we okay? Yeah, yeah.
We'll allow a question.
Happy to, of course.
Sure.
Thank you.
By way of introduction, Adam Solkowski, I teach law at Babson College outside of Boston. We're mostly known for entrepreneurship, but I'm writing about AI regulation. You're a breath of fresh air, love your mission, overdue, from your lips to God's ears, as the saying goes, made this happen. Honestly, candidly, it seems like we have gone so anti-regulation in the United States. Even the small baby step towards a voluntary framework of checking for security purposes was met with resistance this summer. Who's cooperating with you? You have to wait for regime change in the United States? Is it fundamentally not governable? I was talking with an investor, this was yesterday, who believed that because we already have systems that are teaching themselves, dot, 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 his feeling was that this is a fool's errand to think that we can govern what we are creating. That it's already out of control, or it is. So that's one perspective. Who is cooperating with you around the world in terms of legislators or regulators? Are there any of the 5 or 7 middle-aged white males in the world that actually matter that are on board? Is Anthropic the only good guy? Should we believe that? So many questions. But I guess it would be, is it governable? Who's working with you? And out of the tech bros,
You have on
anybody
board.
on board?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a really great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. So,
I'm sorry to present it bluntly, but
no. Yeah, no, very much appreciated.
deliberately bring
Yeah. So I will answer you with the example of what I've been seeing in the industry. So I moved to United States 4 years ago and started building in digital well-being spaces. So 4 years ago, when I moved to New York, when I would tell about like mental health, soft skills, we need to protect humanity, everyone was saying like, oh, that's fluff. No one cares about it. Soft skills are irrelevant. We cannot invest in products that are assessing that. And so for the last 4 years to be observing what's been happening and how much there is now momentum from users, from the average Joe, from the mainstream audience, people are mad. They really are now reacting to this. So hence we are seeing a lot of new lawsuits. Common Sense Media is a wonderful organization that has been making a lot of change in terms of the legislations in California. They're doing some stuff in New York. And right now they're regulating AI companions and access. Then Jonathan Haidt, who's been famous for his book Anxious Generation, very similarly, he basically with his book created a momentum amongst people that are now advocating for the change on the governance level. So we've seen it being regulated already in Australia, where smartphones are banned in schools. Now that's similarly happening in UK. There are certain school districts in the United States. So hence us being in having that approach of like top down and bottoms up. We understand that especially in the United States, there will always be ways for the industry to go around the legislations, and there will be a lot of pushback, which is why we inviting them to join us on this. I live in Japan, so I'm learning a lot from the government system there. There's a lot of movement on like human-machine symbiosis and healthy coexistence in between humans and machines. They have a $1 billion project going on right now called Moonshot, which is all about social acceptance of robots in society. So in order for them to have a high social acceptance rate, they have this holistic approach. And there's a lot about, so they basically measure it by how much humans are perceiving acceptance towards robots. So they're really working on the mindset of their citizens. So, and I'm also from Croatia, so I'm learning from a European ecosystem where we have a lot of regulations. So I think that this is definitely going to be a long process. We are very aware that we need to get big players on board. Right now, we are working our way towards them. We have not officially connected with Optimus or 1X or one of these like large companies that are so famously saying that humanoids are going to be nannying your children, but we are working our way towards that. So I do know that there will be pushback, but also seeing all this momentum that's happening right now, I think that we do have an advantage point, especially with the lobbies that we are working with that have been working on the legislation around the ban of the tobacco. So they really have seen from the work how to approach these very, very big issues. And
I would also say that we can see the public is really receptive to how companies interact with governments that they don't agree with, especially in the US. The Department of War situation that happened with OpenAI and Anthropic, where they tried to get Anthropic on board, then they dropped out and OpenAI went on board. And even now, OpenAI is allegedly selling 5% of their company to the US government. I don't know if people have seen that, where Trump literally wants to have a stake in OpenAI. And the public is responding to that. I mean, the amount of people who have left ChatGPT and moved over to Claude, like whether the companies want to accept that or not, like you need customers to be a company. So to be successful, like you need to appeal to what the public is leaning towards. And I think the Department of War situation like really shows that the public really drives like what companies do and what will work and what won't work. So even when it comes to robotics, if you see companies that are partnering with the wrong kind of parties or not necessarily being as safe as the public assumes is safe, there will be pushback, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think the EU AI Act is a great example. I think the European government, the UK government is doing a lot in terms of at least like LLM safety. And so I think that's a great example to go off of.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.